two-time cosplay champ and longtime patron supporter Carolina Alvarado, also known as Flake's worst nightmare, and you're listening to the Instant Speed Podcast on 983 Media.
Well, I work hard. How come everybody wants to shuffle my cards? And I think that it's true.
This is the Instant Speed Podcast, episode number 82, brought to you by FAB Cards. Go to kfabecards.com. Our guest today is going to be none other than the Pro Tour champion from Baltimore, Michael Feng. And when I say from Baltimore, he won in Baltimore. He's actually from the New Jersey, New York area, but who cares, right? Because we got some news to get to before we talk to the Pro Tour champion. And the first and most important part here, as I get to the notes here, is that there are brand new bans and restrictions announcements that have been leaked or released in the past couple days. And I want to get to those so you are not missing a beat. In classic constructed, hey, no surprise, no changes, because there's still some shaking to be done in that format. But how about Blitz? Blitz got one hell of a shakeup, and based off of some of the moves to Living Legend, be it Oldhim and Icelander, that has freed up some cards to be played by the other heroes. Most notably, Crown of Seeds is moving from suspended. It is now legal. Hypothermia is going from suspended to legal. Aether Ice Vein is going from suspended to legal. And finally, Drone of Brutality is going from banned to legal. A lot of opinions about Drone of Brutality, a card that really made the end game, the fatigue game, so devastating to face. But it is back on the menu, so figure it out, friends. Well, how is Drone of Brutality going to ruin your next Blitz event? All right, RTN season is going to kick off from May 13th through to June 4th. Now, May 13th is exclusive as a start date for Europe, Singapore, Hong Kong, and the UK, that area. So make sure that you check out fabtcg.com, check out the events locator. You can go ahead and cycle through RTN, check out your area, find out an RTN, a Road to Nationals, going around near you. I do want to tell people that I will be playing this Friday. So in a couple days, I'm going to be at the Lost Zone in Bloomington, Minnesota. I will be playing in a Win a Case event that is going to be going down on Friday evening. If you want to sign up, go check out the Lost Zone, give them a call, figure it out. I will be there. It would be really cool to meet you, so you can catch me there. All right, we've got the champion of the Pro Tour Baltimore. That would be Michael Feng. He talks about winning the Pro Tour, the importance of teams versus non-teams, the people he respects in the community, and oh boy, so much more. Like, what the hell do you do in your free time, Michael Feng? We get through all of this on episode 82 of Instant Speed. This episode of Instant Speed Podcast is brought to you by FAB Cards. Located in Utah, FAB Cards is a smart choice for all of your flesh and blood needs. Prepare for the battles you'll face through the world of Wraith by gearing up at kfabecards.com. That's KAYFABECARDS.com, and get all of the cards shipped directly to your door. Hey, if Magic or Pokemon is your jam, they've got you covered. FAB Cards has a plethora of TCG options, sealed products, and singles to keep you collecting and keep you competitive. FAB Cards, be who you want to be. The Instant Speed Podcast welcomes The Sure Thing to the show. His list of achievement runs long, friends. So I'll give you the most recent, which is essentially winning the Pro Tour Baltimore on my boy Oldhim, which is great. This is somebody who just never stops and is here finally for the first time on the Instant Speed Podcast. So welcome to the show. And this is we're gonna get this out of the way now. Michael Feng or Michael Feng, or is it something else?
Well, technically in Chinese, it's Feng. So it could be like Michael Feng, but I think I've kind of grown up and everyone's been saying like Michael Fang, like kind of pronouncing it as if the E was an A. And I'm comfortable with that. Honestly, any kind of permutation works for me, but I do know that like my actual Chinese name in Chinese is Feng Shuo.
Oh, okay.
So it's like Feng, I don't know how to like pronounce that any other way. But yeah.
I do my best. Trust me, there's no bigger nightmare for me than getting the list of like, here are the top 40 players at the Worlds, and some of them, oh my goodness. And I got raked through the
I don't
coals.
mind, basically. So if like Fang is more comfortable, or Feng or whatever, it's all good with me. Like, it's not something I care too much about.
All right, I dig it. Well, I appreciate that, and welcome to the show. And again, congratulations, well deserved. I think that everybody kind of has you on their short list of just being a perennial threat at any tournament that you play in. And let's get real, dude. Like, when I say any tournament that you play in, I think that's almost all of them.
Yeah.
Like, let's just get we're going to get to that shortly. I do want to dive into a little bit about the history of Michael Feng, which is, I mean, Pro Tour champion, sure, but what about everything that led up to that in terms of your life in card games? Everybody has a unique story. What was their first sort of hook into TCGs? Lead us to where we are today. What was that story like?
I played a little bit of Pokemon and a little bit of Yu-Gi-Oh! Before I was 10. When I was 10, I opened my first booster pack. It was a Judgment booster pack, and that's when I was 10. It was 2002. I'm 1992, so when I was 10, it was 2002, and it was Judgment. I from then on played played Magic on and off for like all of my life, basically. Particularly when I graduated college, or when I was a senior in college, I started playing in a lot of Grand Prix. That was kind of like the golden era, I want to say, of like paper Magic. I went to 17 different Grand Prix. I never top 8'd anything. I got 2 of them where I basically top like 32'd. So I went 10-3 and 10-4, but I was pretty much a nobody. Like, I didn't really ever do well at these type of events, even though I went to what I thought was a lot of them. I started kind of playing more casual Magic in about 2018, because that's the same time when Magic started changing, I'd like to say. 2019 was when Secret Lair came out, when a product called the Mystery Booster came out, and that was like my jam. I bought up a lot of Mystery Boosters, and I really wanted to Chaos Draft. And in 2020, my birthday's in March, I was going to have this epic draft. I was going to have one of each pack from the modern era and do a Chaos Draft. And it was March 12th, and that was the weekend when New York City shut down from COVID. And that Chaos Draft was canceled forever. It just never happened. And that was kind of like the turning point for me. Magic's just started not happening anymore because we couldn't play it. At the same time, I started a YouTube channel, kind of doing card, like box breaks and stuff. And that started with Ikoria. And during that time, like once the channel got rolling, people were telling me about FAB TCG kind of in that summer, 2020. But it really wasn't until about the end of the year, this man named Saint, he told me about the game. He was like, Michael, you should really get into this game. Saint and I had been chatting for a bit, and I just respected him too much as a person for him to say, you should really get into this game, for me to ignore it at that point. He showed me with some cold foils, and I was kind of hooked from there. And that's kind of how I got into FAB. Like, I kind of a nobody from Magic, just tried to play, tried to be a grinder, didn't really have success. Basically retired from like competitive Magic and just played more casual. I love drafting. I love doing limited. And Flesh and Blood had a limited portion. You could play sealed, you could play draft. It had like kind of like, it was such an easy like transition for me, or an easy substitution of your Magic itch to try that game. And the cold foils were super pretty. And I was just kind of a different person at that time. I never thought I'd get into competitive Flesh and Blood, to be honest. I remember, and I know I'm ranting now, but I remember seeing the gold foil tunic, like a picture of it.
Sure.
And me and my friend Yanji Lee were looking at it, and I was like, God, it would be so cool to win one of these, man. Like, that thing looks so good. It's probably going to be like the Black Lotus of the game. And, obviously I ended up winning one, but like, it was just such a, I don't know, to get to where I am today, I never would have dreamed of it.
Sure.
A few years ago. Yeah.
Well, I mean, everybody's sort of first is always memorable, whether it's, it could be a calling, it could be something as small as like an RTN or whatever. Mm-hmm. Your first taste of success kind of hooks you. And I want to kind of dig into a little bit about your past here, because you're mentioning about how you went to so many different Grand Prix and big Magic events, and, you never really cracked that top 8. And that's a difficult thing to, just do at a top 8 that has hundreds and hundreds of players playing in it. And these are players that if you said like you got in, fairly heavy at a certain degree, you're probably still lagging behind so many players that have been grinding and playing, one of my favorite moments was my first ever RTN, ProQuest, the first ever ProQuest in Canada. It was Tails Sealed, and I managed to top 8. It was my first ever top 8 ever. And my first opponent was David Rude, and former Pro Tour champion or whatever. I had no clue who this person was because I was never part of the Magic culture. And then afterwards, I'm talking about it to people like Tannen and people. I'm like, oh man, I lost to some dude named Dave Rude. I have no idea who he is. Yeah. And they're like, dude, nothing to be ashamed of there. Like that's a big deal. But I want to know where that gap is, if you can identify what the difference was between your still decent success, top 30 doing big events, to being a perennial top 8 threat at basically every tournament that you enter in Flesh and Blood. Was there something that clicked? Is it a difference in the game, your approach? What's the difference between, mediocre, above average success to winning a Pro Tour in Flesh and Blood?
I think it's a lot of things, but almost everything you said is part of it. Flesh and Blood's a different game. The way that variance plays out in Flesh and Blood is a little bit different from the way it's played out in Magic. I do feel like overall there's less variance, and I think most people that play both games or have a background in both games will tell you that Flesh and Blood has a little bit less variance. The other thing is, I think I just became more mature. When I was playing Magic, I was a senior in college, or just a fresh grad out of college, and I feel like now that it's been like literally like almost a decade, I've just become more mature, and just like the way I like think of life and think of like games and hobbies is just different. And in essence, I think I'm able to be more disciplined about putting like time into practicing. I truly feel like I feel like I was lucky to even have ever like 10-3 or 10-4 to GP, which is kind of like that perfect, you're not making top 8, but you're like getting a little bit of cash. That's kind of like all I was ever able to manage. I feel like even those records were like so lucky compared to like the amount of time, prep, experience that I had done for those events.
Yeah, I've heard of it referred to as being good enough to suck.
Yes. Yeah. Being good enough to just barely be not relevant, basically.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't want to say these words disparagingly. I think that this is like a space that I feel like so many people that attend events end up kind of being in that space, but it's not a bad place to be, but it is a bad place if your priority is like, I really want to win, but you're not actually putting in the reps and putting in the time. And it's not, you don't need to put a lot of time. I think that for some of the events that I was playing in, there are some events where I'm putting in like 5 to 6 hours a day, and that's like extreme. But I try my best to just play like 3 or 4 games a day, or at least 1 or 2, just so that I'm like fresh. And if I really can't jam any games, I'll at least try to spectate some games on Talishar. Like I had a really busy day, I'm laying on my bed, go on mobile on my phone, watch a couple of matchups. Lately, it's just been watching Lexi Oldham. As long as one of those 2 heroes is present, I'll dive in and just kind of see how are they approaching the matchup. People make mistakes on Talishar all the time, but if you're able to identify the mistake, I think that's a little bit of a win for you, because you're only able to see, like, you can't see either person's hand.
Sure.
So there's always some value to be gained. But I think that mainly it was just realizing, wow, I was never really prepared for any of these events. And now I'm putting in the time to be prepared. I still feel underprepared basically for every event I go to. But I think I've come to terms that being underprepared is just a state of life. And if you don't actually feel underprepared, it could be a bad sign, because there's so many things that like could happen, and so many other people who are innovating, that it's good to feel like this, like a little bit of anxiety where it's like, I don't know exactly what someone might do. But I think it's like a combination.
I think to a degree, it's just a realization that you are the odds are never in your favor to
Yeah.
a degree. Because if you think about it this way, like you can be a tennis player and you just need to worry about the person across from you. That's the only person that
Yep.
you need to worry about. But in a tournament, I mean, there's hundreds of people. So it is a statistical anomaly for you to win to a degree, however prepared you feel. And I feel like overconfidence is as big of a detriment sometimes as under preparation,
Yep.
where if you just feel like you know what you're doing, like you're always going to get into matchups just thinking that things are going to work out because
Right.
and I feel like that to a degree, like being hungry for knowledge, being hungry for
Mhm,
improvement
mhm, mhm.
is, in my opinion, what keeps you consistently, successful in tournaments. And I don't have near the same amount of success as obviously yourself or others on the Pro Tour. But I know that when it's like RTN season or PQ season, and I know that I'm putting in the work, I'm confident that I will perform well, but I'm never confident that I'm gonna just win it. And that's, I think,
Mhm.
being able to say like, how do I continuously close that gap? And that's kind of what I want to ask you about when it comes
Yeah.
to winning the Pro Tour and the preparation involved for the Pro Tour. You're mentioning that, when push comes to shove, you're grinding out 5 to 6 hours a day, in the important elements. Was that the case? Was there more than that leading up? What is the prep schedule for Michael Feng moving into a Pro Tour?
So I definitely prepared more for like battle hardened Charlotte than I did for this pro tour. Like battle hardened Charlotte, the 2 weeks leading up to it, uh, we had just come from what was right before battle hard. I can't remember where we were coming from, but I was somewhere else, and then I went to Charlotte. Oh, Auckland. Just came back from Auckland.
Sure.
I made top 8, lost to Dennis in the top 8. Kind of made a really bad mistake that not like me in that matchup. I felt kind of bummed. I came back. I had this like fire in me. I was like, I actually started the year and my goal was the top 8 of calling. And of course, the first calling I made top 8. So I hit my goal, but then I immediately lost. And so I had like this chip on my shoulder. And I was like, I know I'm a better player than I was in Auckland. Even though I made top 8, which was my goal for the year. Like I was so happy to make top 8, but the moment I made top 8, I was like, now I got to keep pushing. So before that battle hardened, I was practicing like 5 to 6 hours a day. Like I woke up in the morning and the first thing I would do is start with a Talishar game before I did anything else. And if I lost, I'd play again. Like I didn't lose twice in a row that week. I only lost like once. I was just like, I need to get better. I felt like also Olton was in a good place at that point. This is before Outsiders. And I wasn't sure, and I had the sinking feeling that post Outsiders, Olton might not be that good. I was practicing 5 to 6 hours a day, and then once I got to the Battle Hardened, that was the only event so far in my Flesh and Blood career where I started playing from round 1 and felt confident the entire way. And that Battle Hardened was a gruel. I mean, these Battle Hardened events are just, it was 8 rounds of Swiss into 3 rounds of top 8. We started playing at 9 a.m. The finals ended at 9:30 p.m.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it was a grind, but I was telling Brody this, and I rarely tell Brody this, but I was like, I feel good about my deck. I'm looking at all the other heroes, and I feel good about the way I constructed it. I feel good about the decisions I'm making. I feel like my mind is sharp right now. And then when I won that Battle Hardened, it just like so much. I felt so much fruit from my labor because I felt like I had practiced so much that week, and I just like it was just like one of those things where like there's justice in this world, I guess. Like like if I hadn't really prepped that much and then just kind of like luck sacked my way into the like it would have been different. But I felt like I had earned it, and I
Right.
felt like yeah. So like that's kind of like peak like testing. But like for Pro Tour, we had booked the Spain trip basically before any of this was announced. I knew there was a risk. I actually strategically asked the family to plan that specific weekend or the 2 weekends before that weekend because I tried my best to guess when the Pro Tour could be or not be. And I ended up just kind of guessing correctly that like it was that weekend. I was in Spain the 10 days before the Pro Tour and I didn't really test much. I think I got in like in total in the last 2 weeks, maybe like 5 or 6 total games with Talishar. Like I did the spectate thing at night, but like I truly felt like I was a little out of touch with the meta. Luckily I did have the team Wolfpack to kind of like bounce ideas off of, and I'm kind of listening to their frustration by like some of the Ultim players' frustration of kind of losing the Lexi, which is roughly how that matchup felt like before I went to Spain. But I didn't feel like I was like, it was like night and day compared to how I prep for Charlotte, that battle hardened.
Sure.
Um, uh, I think that there's like this exercise that teams do or people do where they try to predict like what the meta is going to look like, and then predict each like of the matchups, and then like through that calculation, like there's a math equation basically. You just multiply things. You can figure out like who's basically the best hero, or the hero that you should probably play. And that was like Lexi for sure. But I don't like that exercise because it's so like numbers are all fudgy. You're making up like I think there's going to be 30% Lexis and 20% Oldims. Like it's all like numbers that you're making up.
It's speculation. Like there's no
yeah,
actual data to support it other
Yeah,
than
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. But then there was like Talishar, which had its like meta stats for the month of April, and that was like Lexi was like I think when I checked it was like 57%, and Oldhim was at 52. I think those percentages might roughly be the same for May as well. And so there was like a clear like numbers game that made Lexi look good. And then when we grinded it those actual games, we'd play it out and it'd just be like if you have a 3 of a kind when you need it, when you can stack a Rain Razor, like the damage potential was like I at first thought it was unreal. I was like, this is too much. Then I went back and I actually ran the numbers and played some test games with Chain, the back in the day Chain decks. And I was like, basically it's roughly the same in terms of pure damage. And like if you just give them 4 turns, never molest their hands, it's roughly the same damage. But both Chain and Lexi had the same advantage of 3 of a kind basically being like a husk. Where like even if you force them to block, Chain was resilient enough to have cards from Banish, Art of War, Husk to like still like have a turn. And that was kind of the beauty of Lexi at that time. And that was a scary thing about playing against Lexi as an Ultim, because even if you take 2 cards from them, they can still have a turn that feels like they have 4 cards, maybe even 5 cards. So Lexi was good.
So
we were testing. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say with this sort of algorithm or this formula that you devise, and again, it's not a perfect formula,
right,
because you're taking, I guess, the cumulative assumptions of your team. Yep. Now, they're educated guesses. Obviously, you guys have been there, done that, but you're plugging in numbers and then you spit out on your side. Was it? I mean, you said Lexi and Oldhim were, I think, at the top of the pile, and I think that there was not many secrets to that. You know, Lexi was kind of like the worst secret ever kept, because everybody at the beginning was talking about Azalea as running the show, Dromai having an option, and everybody kind of was like, well, I got some secret spice, and everybody showed up with the same secret spice, which wasn't exactly the most, exotic. It was just pepper off the shelf, but still, at the end of the day, you showed up with Oldhim, and I want to know why, despite what this formula says. Was this something along the lines of you just figured out the edge in that matchup, or was it comfortability? Because you mentioned you were not playing as much. You just said, screw it, I'm just going to go with what I know best. What was the logic that led you to say, I'm registering Oldhim at this tournament?
Well, I kind of told the story after I won the Pro Tour and I was kind of like being interviewed, but like I did bring Lexi to the Pro Tour. I had sleeved it up. We came back from Spain and I had 2 hours at home to just pack everything I could. And then we drove down to Baltimore. I live in New York City / New Jersey. And in that time, I was just like frantically trying to sleeve up Lexi cards. Before I left for Spain, was just going to play Oldhim because I figured I don't have the time to play Lexi. But I became more and more convinced. Like I talked about it with Leslie and I was like I really want to play Oldhim. I feel more comfortable. But Lexi's just like numerically the best deck. Like I feel like I'm going to lose to Lexis who maybe don't really know what they're doing, but they're just going to beat me because like their deck just spits out numbers that are better than me. And she was like, I think you should just play Lexi. Like, do you think you have enough time? And I was like, well, I have like Thursday night to maybe jam some games before. And in the back of my head, I think in the bottom of my heart, maybe I was an Oldhim player, but I think like I really was trying to listen to like reason and these things that my brain was saying that like you gotta at least like try playing Lexi. I tried my best. I sleeved it up, jam some games. First day, it's like Thursday morning. I'm in Baltimore. I'm like goldfishing some hands. I haven't met up with the Wolfpack yet, and I'm like, this deck is like so foreign to me. It's so alien to me that I don't have like a trusty hammer, and like the play patterns are just like not like fluid. Like I don't feel mechanically fluid. And I was just like, I'm not feeling good about this. And at the same time, Brody's talking to me. He's asking me for Oldham tips, and I'm like, Brody's, by the way, been testing Lexi ever since the Chicago event. He won with Azalea, which he probably would have played Lexi there if the team didn't ask him to not play Lexi, actually. So that's basically how, I guess, Lexi was not a really well-kept secret. I was actually surprised watching Chicago, by the way, that there weren't more Lexis. And in the back of my head, I'm like, man, is everyone just sandbagging Lexi? Like, is this like, is every team just like not wanting to talk about Lexi? Because like no one was complaining about Lexi on Twitter. I'm just getting like beaten to a pulp in internal testing, and I'm just like, there's like this huge disconnect. And I think I remember seeing like people talk about how like Azalea being so strong, and I was like, that's like not like, it's just not the same. So yeah, I basically talked with Brody, and I was like, I think you should just play Lexi. Like, I think you and I, for whatever reason, have somehow come into this like we're in this like weird like upside down world where I am somehow trying to play Lexi and you're trying to play Oldham, and it should be the exact opposite. And it doesn't even matter like if we think like he thought that Oldham was the better hero because he had just lost to like one of our teammates playing Oldham a bunch of times, and like Brody really wanted to play like a deck that was more consistent. He had just played Viserai at the Battle Hardened that I won in Charlotte, and he had just like drawn the hands that weren't good. And it's like one of the worst feelings when you put in so much time, so much effort, so much money too, to like travel to these Battle Hardens that don't have really good expected payout, just to lose these like games to your hand, just like your deck just dumpstering you, just giving you all the 2 blocks and like unplayable hands. And yeah, I mean that's like one of the things that Oldham doesn't have as much. Like your hands are typically can block. You can kind of get bailed out just by blocking. You have a little bit more armor. But yeah, I ended up landing on Oldham because we just had like Brody and I just had this like really nice like come to terms moment where I was like, let's just play an Oldham versus Lexi game. We play a couple games, and we're both like, yeah, we should probably just play the other hero.
Did you guys just full swap?
Yeah. Well, not really. I brought both decks, and so he didn't bring his Lexi deck. So I physically just gave him my Lexi cards and my patent sideboard card. So, and I think this is a really good tip that, like, if you're just listening to the podcast, that you could do. But whenever I have I have 2 boxes for my decks. I always have one deck that just has, or one deck box that just has just the cards that I'm presenting my 80, because that's like the deck I would present to get deck checked. And then I usually have another box that's like full to the brim with about 80 cards, and it's every possible card that hero could play, based off of like all the deck lists I've seen, all of the sideboard guides I've seen, just like every single possible card that you could need for that hero, so that at any given point in time you could just sideboard in and out, and you could play like Ice Lexi or completely fuseless Lexi, no ice at all. Like my Oldham sideboard literally has like Sigil of Solace and Healing Balm, and I can transition to becoming a pure Fatigue Oldham if I wanted to. Yeah, I gave all the cards to Brody, and fast forward, it's like last round of Swiss, we're in table 1, and I'm playing against him, and he's presenting my cards that I just hastily sleeved up like a couple of days before, and it was like surreal. I was like, man, like I didn't think I was gonna make top 8 of the Pro Tour, and now we're at table 1 playing my friend who I just been playing like 48 hours under very different circumstances.
And he's playing your cards.
Yeah, he's He's playing at that time we were playing my cards too. But yeah, it's just like one of those things. Because I didn't even have Remorseless, but I had like been opening HP1 on my stream. And so I had these like German Remorselesses, German language, 3 of a kinds. So I don't know. Like when he played the Remorseless, I was like, oh my god, that is my deck. Yeah.
Did you win that match?
I actually did. I won it fair and square for anyone who's keeping track. It did show up as a win on the thing, but because we're teammates, it's possible that one of us conceded here. But we actually played it out. I got pretty lucky against him. I played Channel Lake Frigid, and he had like all reds. And you have to like pitch 2 cards to like 3 of a kind, drew all reds again, pitch 2 reds. Like he has like 4 reds in his pitch zone at the end of this, and he's managed to shoot me with like 1 arrow
Yeah, that'll do
with
it.
the 5-card hands.
Yeah, well,
So
again, like you mentioned, the getting gooned by just bad draws. You travel all this way, and then it happens. That's why I don't play Briar, honestly, because I'm like, I'm not gonna spend even if it's like a close tournament. I'm not gonna spend like $40 to enter a tournament just to find out that the universe hates me. Like that's like, or I'm not paying for that privilege.
I think there's some value in those type of decks though, because especially if you're a little bit under practiced or you feel more comfortable with that type of deck, you get more opportunity to win games against players who might be more experienced than you. And I think that's why a lot of players, that's why you see a lot more like Ultim players kind of at these like events where they're like, there's more higher stakes, because Ultim does kind of like both Guardian classes do smooth out a lot of that variance. But I think there's some value in playing. Like if I like a lot of people who are kind of newer to the game, I do recommend them play like heroes that have like either more linear game plans like Dash, or just like high roll potential like both Lexi, Briar, that just like, I don't care what you're doing, I am going to kill you unless you virtually have the nuts. So
I like it. You mentioned your team, the team Wolfpack and such, and I want to talk a little bit about the importance of team dynamics in especially like high level gameplay, pro tours, etc. I had a whole episode about this a couple months ago with Team Kayfabe, and the way that I kind of taglined the whole episode was I said Flesh and Blood is a team based game. And I got some pushback, and they're like, no, it's one person playing against one other person. I said, okay, well, listen to the entire discussion before you throw out these kinds of comments. But ultimately, I have both been proven correct and proven wrong to a degree. And I want to get into a little bit of what team dynamics are, what it represents, or what it means for you, what goes down, because the finals were such a dichotomy of Michael Feng, who had a wonderful supporting team, and that you, like you mentioned, bounce ideas off of, can practice with, can sort of hold a little bit of secrecy in terms of what you guys are approaching and you know the ideas that you guys are nurturing, versus Mara Faris, who's you know has played a shit ton of this game, but doesn't have the same kind of support staff, as it were, or the same network, and that she can rely on for this kind of prep and such. I played a few against her. I you know, helping her out in certain matchups and whatnot. But do you agree that Flesh and Blood at the highest levels of competition is inherently a team-based game?
So I do think that Flesh and Blood being on a team gives you a net positive advantage. And I do think that there's going to be way more events that are going to have more top 8s, that are going to have players who do have teams that test with. But I don't think that everyone needs to be on a team to be super successful. I think that Flesh and Blood is at its base level still a meritocracy. The variance is quite low. Good players are going to win regardless if they're on a team or not. So I think that there's a little bit of this like the weird dynamic where oftentimes some of the best players are also on teams. And so maybe like it's like hard to remove, well, would they still have been successful if they weren't on a team? Because they were quite, you know, smart individuals that were just good at the game. And because they were winning, being good at the game, they kind of naturally either drew teams to want them, or they kind of naturally gravitated toward teams. So I think it's like twofold. I think that like overall, if like this was a yes or no question, I would lean towards yes. I do feel that it's becoming more and more so. You're having more and more people want to consolidate themselves into teams to get better, because they see that, you know, like I think ever since like our team, I guess, got so many guys in the top 8 and then my win, I think it does kind of put the spotlight on teams being important, giving you an edge, maybe the edge that you need to make the top 8, to do well, to succeed. I think where Flesh and Blood teams have a really nice advantage is these mixed formats where it's draft and CC, because most of my testing with my team is one-on-one. Like it's like you can't like there's a three-headed giant like three people operating the Lexi deck, one person's actually piloting, and then me on Ultim. Like that happens sometimes too, but most of the time it's in essence one-on-one. But when you have a bunch of people that you can like kind of call upon to do drafts, that also gives you kind of a nice advantage as well. But I think that I don't want to discourage people who aren't in teams, I guess, from thinking that they'll never make it to the top. Because as you mentioned, Mara, like so much respect for her, made it to the finals of the Pro Tour. And I don't think that like I think that, like anyone that is just like kind of like smart, intuitive can do really well in Flesh and Blood. That's kind of the dynamic I've learned as I've, played a lot of people.
That's the I think part of what might turn people off from it is the realization that you play in your locals. Maybe you're like an Armory All-Star, you're like 3-0 every week. Maybe you've top 8'd an RTN or a PQ, but you've never really dipped your toe into the big show. You've never done a Battle Hardened, you've never done a calling or whatnot. And I think that there's a real big revelation to people when they finally do dip their toe into the Shark Tank, that they're so far behind, and there could be problems enticing those people to actually pursue that that pinnacle of winning a calling or top 8ing. And I suppose a lot of that is just also the realization, like, hey, I don't have the same kind of testing network or outlets. And I know that one of the things, and this is one thing that I so genuinely appreciate about you, is that when I asked you to do this podcast, one of their replies was, yeah, but like, I want to also focus on community building and stuff like that, which is an awesome thing to say. I mean, you just won arguably the biggest tournament of your career, and here you are saying, yeah, who gives a shit? Like, let's talk about making this game and this community better. So how would you address that concern for players who are good but are so damn intimidated to sign up and slam down a airfare, hotel, and a ticket to a calling? And now I always say, screw it. The experience itself is awesome, but I come from a position where I go there and I have friends and people to talk to. So whether I go 0-3 drop or I'm making the top 8, it's the same kind of joy more or less that I'm having.
Yeah. I guess before I go too far on encouraging, I just want to talk about the fact that just because you're on a team doesn't mean everything is going to be roses. Internal testing can be inbred, and some team dynamics don't work that well. Like, not everyone that is in a team right now should probably be in a team. There are some teams that, like, if you don't have the right mix of people, there could be like distrust or like kind of just like things like egos that really don't make your Flesh and Blood experience that much better. So I think that like the main thing about teams is if it elevates your Flesh and Blood experience, that's like more important than anything else. Because if the testing is a little bit inbred, sometimes if you're not on a team, you can see things that teams may not be seeing. Teams may be like being a little bit too reductive with some of the matchups, some of the heroes. Some certain heroes could just get slide, just kind of I guess get unseen, for example.
Right. They fly under the radar because I feel like confirmation bias is a huge problem.
Yeah. Like I think it ended up not panning out for this Pro Tour, but like I thought that, like, for example, Viserai was a hero that was kind of not really getting the respect that it deserved. And I think that a lot of people just wrote it off like, oh, it's not getting to Lexi, it's not getting to Oldham, like that kind of like vibe. I think that like there could have like definitely been a hero that wasn't like Lexi, that just kind of like had a good Lexi matchup, not so bad against everyone else, that could have just like totally shaken up the Pro Tour. And I still think that that's possible. I just think that like it just so happened that not everyone was playing maybe those type of heroes. I think for me, I wasn't in a team for a really long time. So this is not something that we say on the Wolfpack blog, but I actually approached Zach at Worlds. And I was like, hey, I approached him at PT Lil, sorry. And I was like, I know that you guys have a team and I'd love to join. but out of respect, I am happy to wait until after Worlds because I know you guys have been testing for Worlds probably. But Zach was like, you know, he flattered me a lot because he was like, oh, we really would want to bring you on immediately. Like I didn't even know you were interested, blah blah blah. And I was like, oh man, that's amazing, great. Like I get to play with you guys. And before then, I had been talking to Michael Hamilton actually about certain like Ultim things, actually just certain things in general. And I felt so bad because I knew he was on a team, and I didn't want to like get him to like be in an awkward spot like that. Like I can't really tell you that type of thing. But like everything he said was like always so insightful. And I was like, it's so hard not to like talk to you. And then once we were on the team, it felt really nice. I think that like that whole process felt like it's like hard to replicate. Because I know someone tweeted like, how do you get into a team? Like I see all these people, they're in teams. Like how do you do that? And I hope that this is like not something that like people lose sleep over with, but like one of the ways I feel like you can kind of make a team happen is by going to your local armory. It's like it's kind of weird to say that, right? It's like how do those things relate? But like I feel like like the way that team formed is like there's Zach, Matt, and Ian, and these guys are geographically close to each other. And we have a couple of guys from like the Midwest, and they're all like people that know each other, and they participate in armories. And one of the reasons that I got Dave to join our team is because he kept beating me at the local armory scene, and I was like, this guy's a smart guy. I really want to play more with him. And I feel like putting yourself out there, whether it be the armory or the battle hardened scene, any type of scene, is like one of the first steps to kind of either creating a team yourself or like being invited to a team or like having that like, hey, like I play a lot of events, I'd like to join your team. Like that, like these are like ways that you can like join a team or make a team happen. And I think that like, I don't know, like I can't emphasize it more, but going out and actually playing at your stores is like the stepping stone for like competitive Flesh and Blood, in my opinion, at this point in the game. I think that like Michael Hamilton's journey is like one of the few that doesn't start with the armory. But I think like more so than not, that's like how you're gonna elevate your game and level up your game is like getting to know the locals and finding a couple of guys you like, saying, hey, do you want to play some games like not in the store, offline, chat about Flesh and Blood, and kind of just move on from that.
Yeah. Well, Team Harry Tarantula. I mean, I call him Team Harry Tarantula, but like the players who play out of Toronto, a lot of that was just the fact that there was just opportunity because they all played out of more or less the same store. So it's like, we're all good. Let's all just get together and throw some ideas around. And that basically translated into, all right, well, we have draft camp here. And like, we're, you know, I remember going to Tarek Patel's place ahead of, I forgot what it was. I don't know if it was Nationals or something, but just going to Tarek Patel's place, you know, had a barbecue. 8 of us just started drafting, drafting up. Awesome. Yeah, it was great. But like, we're not on any sponsored team. We're not like affiliated. It's just eight people who appreciate the game and know each other. And it's like, yeah, well, you put up with my bullshit. I put up with your bullshit. We have good ideas. So that's how it goes. Now, I want to just sort of wheel back really quickly to the winning the Pro Tour and all that. And I have to, one thing I do have to commend you on is there was so much appreciation for your opponents throughout a lot of the tournament. And one of the first things you did after winning was, you know, congratulate your opponent and also go ahead and share the joy with your teammates. I don't even have to talk about when I briefly gave you the microphone and say any quick words. And you said the first person that you thanked was your wife, right? Like that's awesome. And I want to know where this comes from. And I'm not saying it because it's so freaking outlandish for somebody to have respect for their opponent, but this is oftentimes what turns people off from competitive gaming in general, whether it's Overwatch or Flesh and Blood. Somebody's going to be pissed and ruin it for everybody else. What keeps you motivated in that regard to show that kind of appreciation and that kind of respect for your opponent? And it's going to sound so effing weird for me to say this because for many of you listening to this, it's gonna be like, it's just common sense, just do it. But for many, they just want to, you know, they just want to be salty and leave.
I think that it was so much easier for me to do all the things that I did after I won the Pro Tour. I actually think that Um, I'm doing
Well,
the same thing you just said that I was gonna
winning
do.
helps. Look, winning helps,
Yeah,
definitely.
winning helped. I actually thought that like the way Mara reacted was way more commendable than the way I reacted because to be honest, to actually answer your question, let me take a step back. To actually answer your question, the way that I've come to really respect my opponents and always want to kind of give that credit back is I have lost so many games. I've lost in the finals. I lost to Tarek in the 2001, the first US Nats. I've lost top 8 games. I've lost Swiss games. I've lost to players who are relatively new. And I knew that I was probably more experienced than them. And I just was so humbled, even frustrated at myself losing those games. And I've lost so many games because I've had the privilege to participate in so many tournaments. I feel like I know how. It's so weird because I'm saying that because I know I won the Pro Tour, but I feel like I know what it's like to lose, and especially to lose at relatively high stakes games. And I think that the coolest thing about playing Flesh and Blood is especially the games that are grindy, like the Ultim versus Dromite games can often be very grindy. Even my game against Mara still went to like turn like I got 3 tunic counters and I missed the tunic counter, so we still went to turn 10. Like that's a game of Flesh and Blood. Turn 10 turns is like you're almost like having a conversation with your opponent in some ways. And as you're having that conversation, you learn to respect them because they're making plays that like maybe I know that Mara had some really bad hands and I could tell the way she played, but I felt like she didn't tilt. She tried her best. And honestly, when the game ended, I was obviously very emotional, but I'll be honest, I really didn't notice it at the time. But like when I rewatched the stream, I think that one of the ways when you take a loss and you're able to like keep it together, um, I think that's more commendable than how I like responded and like I felt like all the things I did was like it's so much easier, right? Because like I just won. Like I'm in this like I'm coming from this like place of like positive, like reaffirmation affirmation. Whereas the moment you lose, that's just like I know that that is like the most like one of the lowest points that you could feel. Um, and for her to still like she gave me the handshake, she congratulated me still, and she even gave me like the clap at one point. I thought that that was to me that's character, right? I know I did a couple things. All the things I did were just like that's just like what I wanted to do. Like I wasn't trying to like position myself to be like, oh, I'm such a good sport. It's like those things like I didn't even think about, but I felt like the way she reacted was like that's like character. And I feel like the same way with Yuha as well and Jake. Like all my top 8 opponents were just like so like they made me feel so good about being in the Flesh and Blood community with them.
That's good. That's good to hear. Because there's a lot of people who will, the first thing they do when they do a good deed is to slam it on Instagram and tell everybody how cool they are, you know? And humility is I think so underappreciated these days because humility doesn't necessarily mean you're not doing good things and people aren't noticing. It's just that you're not the one ringing the bell every time that you do something great. And I think that a lot of people, I know that like from everybody I spoke to, it was very amazing to see Mara and yourself at the final table because what a representation of the community of, you know, you have the sure thing, Michael Feng, who's just constantly grinding, working, improving, and also has such amazing relationships with so many people in the community, a well-respected person as yourself. I know that you and I have had very few interactions, but one of the first times I actually had like a few minutes to actually chat, you gave me a big hug, and that was something I'm a hugger. That's what I am, and it's like I never impose that on people, but I was like, that's Michael Feng, dude. That's the sure thing. That's the guy who gets the job done. I'm like, I'm not gonna pollute his luck with my body and give him a hug. And you just showed up. You're like, dude, what's going on? I was like, wow, that's so awesome. And then there's Mara Faris, who is an artist. She's does the most incredible altars. She's a community member, has, harbors great discussions. But she's also absolutely brilliant at playing Dromai. And, there's such a great representation that I was so happy and proud of how the tournament unfolded. And I have to ask you as well, was this the greatest tournament that Flesh and Blood ever had. Removing yourself and your victory out of it, because that's an easy win for you to say. But do you think that this was the most successful, the best tournament Flesh and Blood has ever put on?
I do think that trying to remove myself from it and being objective and trying to talk about all the other factors, like how it was organized, how the live blog, how coverage was, how things ran smoothly both with the calling and with the main Pro Tour event. I do think it was the best kind of like Flesh and Blood weekend that we've had so far, and at one of the biggest scales. Like we've had way more people participate in that calling than I really expected. Although obviously the numbers were a little skewed because it had some of the Pro Tour participants. Yeah, I can definitely say that it was like the best weekend in that sense, with all those like star disclaimers. And I hope that it's not going to be the best for very long. I hope that from here on out, every event just gets better and better. I hope that Worlds, we're gonna have this conversation again. Wow, was Worlds the best event ever? Because I think that there's still some space to improve. I think that there's still like Flesh and Blood is still kind of in its infancy, and there's like so many ways that we can like make like the coverage a little bit better in terms of like how we transition between games, and maybe like even like copy a couple pages from like the Magic Pro Tour like coverage, like starting a little bit late, having like pre-record, like there's ways to improve. But I do think that like nothing I felt like was done was like done in a way that I wish it was done differently. So yeah, I do think in that sense, and I'm really happy about it too, because I feel like it makes, obviously because I want, it's so hard to not be biased about this, but it makes winning feel better when the event was run smoothly and in a way that like you can be proud of, right? Like
Certainly.
so.
No, I hear you there. Again, you winning is just sort of gives it a nice rosy glow at the end of it all. But I think all in all, a lot of the huffing and hawing about it being in Baltimore and this and that, I was like, you know what? I'd still feel for everybody who's not in North America, because it's difficult to travel, and Baltimore is not exactly, the crown jewel of America. But ultimately, I think that just the event itself was great. And, from somebody who has a minor inside track on things of going on in LSS, I can tell you confidently that the team that put this event on, this is to them, and I'm paraphrasing what they said, but it's more or less, this is kind of like 30% of what they want Worlds to be in terms of the things they wanted to accomplish. And yeah, I mean, like I got to watch, I have friends who were involved in the broadcast at the Magic PT this past weekend. And I was so jealous. Like Alias V is like a very close friend of mine. And I messaged her. I said, "You bitch." I was like, "How do you get this kind of set, this kind of everything?" And she's like, "It is what it is." And I agree, man. Like it would be so awesome. But let's move on now to a little bit of a downtime with Michael, because there's cards with Michael. Now, how about non-cards with Michael? Because you are essentially like I just randomly threw out there a tweet saying, "Hey, what other events? What should I lock and load for? Like, I'm not going to be working all of them, but like, I want to know what's coming around the bend. What should I want to get back into the competitive grind, And you gave me this laundry list. And the first response to that was, I think, "Are these what you're attending?" So I have to ask you two things. The first is, how the hell do you maintain this constant hustle? And what the hell do you do in your downtime, if there is any?
Well, so for a living, I am kind of in the buying and selling of the card game space. And I think that a lot of it is my reputation. I'm a trustworthy individual, so I can be a middleman, I can be a broker. And I do a lot of kind of like buying and selling, mainly with like new set releases, to make money, to make a living. And I'm pretty upfront about it. I'm pretty transparent about it when I'm making like a profit off of a transaction. And a lot of people are happy to kind of like let me make a little bit of money, adding random amounts of value. Sometimes it's just I was able to buy in bulk, wholesale, and kind of resell. So in some ways, I know what it's like to be on the retail side of Flesh and Blood, Magic, all the trading card games. I also do box breaks kind of on my Twitch channel and my YouTube channel, where I open product at a premium and then make some money that way. And so that's literally the only two ways I make money, make a living. I don't make a ton of money that way. I can pay the bills. Leslie also works full time, and so we kind of jointly are able to cover all that. I do not work that many hours in the week. I have a lot of hours of flexibility. I'm technically my own boss in that sense. So if I want to like take more time to play Flesh and Blood, I can. But that's not what you asked. You asked, how do I relax and how do I like, what do I do on my downtime?
Well, it's also good to know what's going on in the background because
Right.
I mean, this is the reality of it is a lot of people think like, well, what do you do in your downtime? I'm like,
Right.
bitch, I don't make that much money. There is no downtime. Like the grind is fucking
hustle.
real.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but it's good to put a little bit of framework here in terms of the fact that, you know, if you were doing this while rolling a 60-hour week, making like, you know, six figures, people are like, what are you doing? Like, is this really a side quest that you want to enroll on? So knowing that what goes on in the background is important.
Yeah, that's my context. I think that to say that I am blessed or fortunate or privileged, I feel all three of those things, and it would not be at all an overstatement. I am kind of at the crossroads of everything being in my favor, I feel, to be able to really try my best to win these events. I don't have kids. My parents are really healthy and making a heck of a lot more money than I am right now.
Preach.
They're kind of at their like peak. I think they're at their prime of like making money. Like I can't pay their taxes with the amount of money I'm paying. I'm making, and so I don't have to worry about them. I don't have to worry about really anyone. Like no one in my family is like suffering from whatever. And I have like kind of this like setup with like the way I do, you know, brokering and buying and selling TCGs that I'm able to make kind of a reasonable living. I could make more money and work harder and work more, but I am happy kind of I'm content with where I'm at. And I can just dedicate like heck of a lot of time to testing, like 5-6 hours. I was testing for Charlotte. That was like no big deal. I didn't have to clear it with anyone. I didn't have to take days off. That's what I wanted to do, and I was motivated, and that's what I did. And I got to go to vacation in Spain for 2 weeks. Same thing. Like I just like, you know, I wasn't able to make as much money at that time. You know, I wasn't able to do some of the deals I wanted to or could have. But I'm just kind of blessed that I have just a combination of free time, discretionary income. And since I'm well connected in the TCG space, like even if cards are an issue, like I need cards, like I'm like I have access, and I just feel like I just like all these check boxes, and like I'm just kind of at the cornerstone of all these things, and that's really helped me honestly win these tournaments. Like I just like I have not only a wonderful personal support system, but like from a business and like from a financial standpoint, I also feel like I'm covered, and I just like don't have to worry about so many things that I know so many other players and just other people living, breathing in the world have to worry about. I just get to worry about, am I going to beat Lexi or am I going to be like the amount of problems I have is so much more narrow, and I'm never going to like take that for granted. And I'm never going to say like other people should devote more time to like, I just like, I don't think people should be able to live so comfortably like this. Like it feels like a dream, right? Like
it feels like you're cheating. Yeah. Well, the problem there, I think, is that it's not necessarily that you should not be living this way. It's the fact that it's harder for everybody to live this way for so many other people. And, you know, there's also a lot of maturity and realization if you are aware of that. And I mean, you know, if we're going to get into the weeds a little bit over here, I quit a very lucrative, very like super rocket ship trajectory career path where I think if I had stayed there when I quit like 4 years ago, if I'd stayed there, I'd be making six figures and like have a sweet title and all kinds of perks.
Right.
But I woke up every morning hating my life, like legitimate, like borderline suicidal thoughts based off of the fact that I had to wake up and go do this. And it's difficult. And now people will ask me, they're like, well, what do you do in your time off? I said, I have the same damn thing that I do, whether it's by necessity or by recreation. I'm still well immersed in the precise life that I want to set up and expand upon, which is within this broadcasting sphere, obviously, but cards, gaming, and stuff like that. When you say that you rock like 5 to 6 hours of testing, I mean, is it safe to assume that you're doing this with a smile on your face because you want to?
There are definitely some times where I'm like, oh man, like I don't feel like playing, but I just take a break at those times. And here, I'm going to answer your question. I play other games as well, mainly 4X grand strategy games. So Civilization 6, Crusader Kings 3. Today I just downloaded Age of Wonders 4 right before we started talking. So like that type of game is like my jam.
Sure.
It's just takes my mind off of Flesh and Blood very quickly. So I am a free spirit in the sense that like if I'm not feeling it, I don't want to do it. So I'm never forcing myself to test because I feel like when I'm testing while kind of under these like emotional anxieties, I'm not getting real games in, and I don't want to actually ever get used to playing that way. I want to like separate myself emotionally from those type of games because I'll often lose and get more frustrated and just goes this downward spiral. But typically, a lot of those hours, I just remember that weekend or that week really well, and I was just on a roll. Like I had one day I played 26 games. I won 25 of them on Talishar. I lost one game in an Ultimate Mirror, and I went to bed and I couldn't stop thinking about that one game. I think it was like 5 a.m. I had taken screenshots of the other person's deck, and I basically memorized their deck because it's an Ultimate Mirror, so you get to like really like you get to know the other person's deck, and it made me think so much. And like that's like where I was at for that weekend. Like actually my end week with two different decks was like 96.7%. Like it was like something really high. Like I only lost like 4 or 5 games the entire weekend. And or the entire week leading up to that battle hardened. And it was just like one of those things where like I was just feeling it. Like I felt like every single matchup I had a plan. I could change my deck and I could still kind of make a plan as long as I just like it was like all in my belly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that was just like, gosh, if I think that was I remember thinking like, man, I wish the Pro Tour was like literally tomorrow. But of course, outsiders hadn't come out yet. The draft, no one knew what the draft format was going to be like. But like that was a level of confidence I had at that time. And like, man, by the time the Pro Tour happened, it was like a completely different story. But yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes like you feel like you just tuned into it like right in like the perfect frequency where whether your
Right.
deck, your familiarity with it, the meta itself, everything just lines up. And you're like, can this be tomorrow? Because if I have to wait another week, things might change, and I don't have the mental capacity or the focus right now to sort of
Yeah.
keep an ear to the ground on that. Now, let me ask you this: you've won Pro Tour. Obviously, there's still, in my opinion, like the big one, which is Worlds, that must motivate you. But what motivates you to go to a battle hardened, to travel to a calling, to go to something like even an armory? You know, like Brody does like 6 or 7 armories a week. The kid's absolutely insane. But his responsibilities versus your responsibilities are often obviously different. This isn't to take away from his hustle at all. But what is your motivation to keep going to even the mid-tier events?
So, I don't know. Okay. Yeah, I don't like lying. So the reason I first started going to Battle Hardens was I watched the Battle Hardened Portland stream, and there were some not so optimal plays. Actually, a lot of not optimal plays going on the stream, and I was like so frustrated watching the stream. I was like, man, I could like if you put me there, I probably could beat him. And then in my head, I'm like, me saying these things doesn't like it's like shouting into the wind. Why don't I just try my best, go to one of these things, and just like win one? Then I can prove to myself that like it just wasn't productive for me to watch the stream and just feel so frustrated. Basically, I signed up for 2 Battle Hardens. Like after Portland, I don't remember which Battle Hardens there were, but I know I won one of them. I know I won Minneapolis, and that was like good enough for me. And I was like, okay, we can do it. But like that was originally my motivation. Honestly, it was just like I just felt like I think there's my frustration is twofold when I see that when I was watching, and I feel so bad because now if you ever played in the Battle Hard in Portland, in particular you were in stream, I feel like I just kind of like said you're not playing well, but like like I don't know, I didn't watch everything. I just watched enough that I was like, I can't even watch this anymore.
Hey, the Pro Tour champion just said that you're not playing to his level. I think that's
so
totally,
bad.
but that's totally okay.
That's truthfully
Dude,
how I felt.
I'm pretty sure this is why like Tom Brady unretired is because he saw like training camp and said you all suck. Like it, I could totally see that happening. It's like I can do this better.
Oh shit! I think I lost my train of thought. But
So you're watching them play. You're realizing
Yeah.
that the competition level, even like the undefeated,
oh
yeah.
double frustration is, and then I can't win my local armories because I am just getting crushed.
Who plays there?
So going into more on the New Jersey side, but I've lost so many. I've never won an RTN or a ProQuest to put things in context, but I have split the finals a couple times because I'm usually locked by XP. But like in no particular order, I've lost to Dan Rakowski, I've lost to Yanji Lee, I've lost to Yongji Yang, I've lost to Cody Williams, who top aided last year's Indy, Joe Cologne.
These are all big names. I mean, these are
Yang.
yeah.
I've lost to Dave Lin, who's kind of the new rising star. I hope one day Dave is also interviewing with you because he is like top mind of the game. Like close, like just not as familiar with the game, but could be Michael Hamilton if more familiarity was given.
Well, hook him up. I
He
listen.
started playing in February, and he has top aided 2 callings, and he has won a PTI event. He already has 3 PTIs. Like I'm calling my shot. He's going to be one of those players that you're going to see more often.
Listen, I mean, that's a huge endorsement, big time for sure. But I mean, the accolades that he's already acquiring, you know, like the sort of the dap on his name is just piling up. So
Yeah. So like I was like losing locally, and I was like, man, I just gotta fly out. I gotta leave this state if I want to win something. And that's why I started playing the Battle Hardens. That was my initial catalyst. But lately it's become this thing now. Like there's a Battle Harden. Why not? I don't go with the expectations of winning. I think that these tournaments are not designed, like you mentioned, statistically, you are not likely going to win that thing. There are so many rounds, so many opportunities for variance. And the structure of the tournaments are like the way Flesh and Blood does its tiebreakers. I think they're fine. I have no problem with them, but they are very punishing. Like you could lose round 1 and maybe not top 8, even if you win every single round. And that's scary. Although now they've added the extra Swiss rounds to most of these battle hardens so that you can lose round 1, win out, and you'll still make it, but you can't lose again. Like every loss is like just exponentially more punishing than the next. Like your win rate needs to be like 90% plus to win. And that's reasonable, right? Like that's everyone's win rate that usually wins these big high levels super Swiss tournaments is like that. I don't expect to win, but it's become a lot more fun now that Brody's been traveling. Dave has also been traveling to some of these, so having people that you know, and also, honestly, all these events now, it's like really cool getting to meet the locals, people who are local there that I normally only get to see at the Pro Tour and the Worlds events. Getting to kind of mingle, get to chat with them, get to play with them. It's like really cool. Like I feel like like play the game, see the world is like definitely one aspect of it, but it's also play the game, see the world, make connections with like other humans.
It's a nice thing.
Like, are everlasting. And that's like really cool. And like sometimes like for example, for Minneapolis, I got to crash at someone's place that I didn't know, but I'd sold some cards to, and he was like, dude, are you the Michael? Do you want to stay over at my place? I heard you're coming to Battle Hard in Minneapolis. And I was like, yeah, why not? I'd love to crash. So like that journey has just been so wonderful. And I think that I'm glad that it exists. And I think that like it's for the love of the game that I'm really traveling now. It's not for the love of like money, because you cannot love money and try to travel to these battle hardens. Like you have to win to like net even, I think, in terms of cost benefits. But it is quite fun. And I think there's like this glory aspect of it. And I do value that as well. But I think more than anything else, it's like being able to compete at that level is something I'm always craving. And I feel like games where you make correct decisions and then you feel rewarded, like that feeling, games where you make decisions, first of all, but then they're correct decisions and you feel rewarded. That is like the most satisfying thing for a TCG like player. So
It's a good feeling to have, absolutely, when it gets paid off, when your efforts get, the
Yeah,
ROI is just in
yeah,
droves. So it's a
yeah,
it's a great feeling. But of the most important element I want to peel out of that response, which again was so well articulated, is the fact that you're making connections. You're with people, and I think that that is often overlooked when it
yeah,
comes to events. Everybody, a lot of people will look at events and say, well, okay, it's going to cost me like $60 to enter. I got to get a hotel for 2 nights, this, that, I'm going to drive, split the gas, whatever.
yeah.
And then they equate it in that regard. And that's perfectly fine because a lot of people are either too busy to fully,
Mhm.
commit to the community dynamic, or they just don't care. And that's cool too. But
Yeah,
I think that the community here in Flesh and Blood, and having spent so much time in so many other communities, this one, I've said this so many times, it feels different because I'm the same person in every community and every interaction that I've ever been in. But there's something about this community that just feels like it's not necessarily just about win rates. It's not just
yeah,
about what's the most bang for my buck I can get out of buying a
yeah,
box and things like
yeah.
that. It's less about the numbers and data and more about the feel. And you, as such a worthy champion now at the sort of the helm of competitive Flesh and Blood, how do you evaluate the community and how would you continue to build upon it?
Um, yeah, I've really only played Magic before this, and I feel like I was spoiled with Magic as well. I think that Magic is so big, it's really hard to generalize the community. But the friends that I made while I was playing Magic was just like really really good for me. Like it was a pretty good support network. Wasn't a team, wasn't a pro team. I wasn't like top eighting things and doing super well, but like we had a lot of fun. We'd like eat after we scrubbed out of tournaments, and I thought that it was really cool. Um, I feel the same way about Flesh and Blood, but um, I have this like feeling that you just mentioned that like the Flesh and Blood community overall is, and part of it is because it's like smaller, it's a little bit more tight knit. But it feels more like a big family than Magic, and part of it I can't stress enough. Part of it is because it is small, and it's like we kind of have to be like this, right? We gotta take care of our own because there's so few of us, and we really want to keep everyone kind of engaged and franchised and involved in the game. But I think partly also the one dynamic that I can't help but I noticed this at its peak when Nathan Stewart won the Pro Tour from Magic.
Hmm.
My goodness, the average Flesh and Blood player is so much older than the average Magic player now. Like the boomer generation of Magic players are like most of them are like retiring or like they've gotten kids and they're like it's like now it's like the Zoomers I guess are really doing a number in the pro circuit. But man, Flesh and Blood is just like older. Like the community is a lot older. The game, of course, has 16 plus on the card packs, but I do feel like that this like maturity does also lend to a better. I don't want to say better, but like just like a more inclusive and more understanding, almost a more wholesome community. In fact, having a community at all,
Yeah.
it's something that like guys and girls who get a little bit older, they're like that. Those are things that you value. You want to have this like social aspect of a game. You don't want to just like go there and just like juice the inexperienced noobs. Like you want to have this like something else, and I think that that's really cool.
Yeah, I tend to agree in that regard. I also think that I'm not naive enough to think that this is, as Flesh and Blood continues to grow, that is not going to sort of like any types of, you see it already, like certain levels of toxicity and whatever are going to, they leak into every
Yes. Yep,
successful
yep,
or
yes.
so you can't escape it. And
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I'm just happy to see that good people succeeding in this
Yeah.
game, whether
Yeah.
it's yourself, whether it's the rest of the community. I have very few harsh words for very few people out in the community, but they're
Yeah.
not even worth saying because I'm too
Yeah.
busy trying to pump the tires of the people who deserve it, like yourself. And
Thank you.
Michael, I do sincerely appreciate you doing this like you mentioned, you're a busy guy, but you're not a busy guy at the same time,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the fact that you take time for me makes me super happy, my man. And I want to give you an opportunity real quick before we go to the Go Again segment, which
Okay.
is community questions and such. If you ever anything you want to plug, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach Michael Feng?
Okay, so I am at Twitter at cards of M. I just want to say that like I don't typically answer questions that are a little bit more like strategy sideboardy. It's just part of it is because I do feel like I'm not sure I have the best answers, and I know that you're like people ask me because I just want to bet, and I probably know. But also partly because I feel like I'm at this weird space where I actually not only do I test with Wolfpack, but I test with a lot of people, and I almost always feel like my lips have to be sealed because I know like all this like tech from like all these different people, and a lot of questions are a little bit pointed, and I'm like I look at it and I'm like I feel like the only way I can really answer this is by like telling someone else's like response, because I often am like asking what other people think, and it's like hard for me to not like give away that kind of stuff. So if I don't answer questions like that, please don't take it personally. But if I do answer questions like that, it's because I truly feel like it's like something that like I can tell you. So don't be afraid to ask me again or rephrase your questions. Or maybe I should just start answering questions like, hey, like that's not something I can really answer because like I think it's like something like that I can't really tell you. But like if you ask me something else, maybe I'll be able to answer that. Because like I've been getting a lot of that. It's the Pro Tour. Part of it's like I actually don't know the answer. I think the only thing I do want to plug besides my Twitter and how to get in contact with me is I really want to encourage people to play in your local armories. I think that I thought about this for a really long time, and I think if one of your concerns is you're not very experienced, and it's particularly if it's a constructed like a CC or a Blitz tournament, and you're not really sure what to do, I would still encourage you to make a deck to the best of your ability, to the best of your card pool, and as you're playing your opponents, even if you are just getting your face smashed in, just be very earnest and humble in asking, hey, are there ways you think I can improve my deck or my play? And I think that because I've been getting requests for coaching, and I think that like you'll be surprised by how much value your opponent will give you when they realize that like your goal is to get better at this game. Because first of all, you're probably losing, so they don't have anything to lose, right? Like, but they have so much to gain from elevating you as another player in their community, as another number at least. And I just like really want to encourage you to do that. And I think if you're past that point, you're like, hey, I've been like having some success, but like not having that much success, I would still encourage you to go to armies because like you should kind of take a peek and see who else is being successful. And those are like the best people, if you're not so well connected right now, to get better at the game with play not at the armory, or go early to the store, or stay late and jam some games. Third point is if you're already doing that, but still not having success, I think then is the point where you might want to consider, hey, maybe talking to some of the teams. And at that point, that's like the level. But if you're not there yet, that whole process could take a year or 2 weeks. And I think that's the exciting part about Flesh and Blood right now is like Dave started playing in February, and we have gotten him down to like already top 8 in callings. And I think that is so exciting. And I think that like that could be you. Just put some time in it. It does take time though. Like, unfortunately, there is a saying that I go by, and you always make time for things that you love is something I truly believe. Like, I know that some people work 3 jobs and you have financial concerns and you have all these other headaches, but for the one thing that you love, I bet you'll be able to make time for it. And maybe it's not Flesh and Blood, actually. Maybe that's like something that you have to come to terms with. But if it is Flesh and Blood, make time for it. And unlike any other game I've played, I really feel like you will be rewarded for putting the time into the game. So yeah, that's my spiel.
That's some good wisdom right there from the Pro Tour champion. That would be Michael Feng. So thank you so much for doing the show, my friend. What's the next stop for you?
I am going to Antwerp. I'm going to go next week. I'll be there on Thursday morning. I think there's a road to Nats in Ghent that I'm trying to go to. So if you're going to go there, look out for me, I guess. But I hope that I'll be able to see a bunch of people, especially a lot of the Europeans I was able to play with this weekend or last. Oh my gosh, it's been a whole extra week. But yeah, I'm going there. I think that I planned on going there before I even went to the Pro Tour,
Sweet.
and I'm gonna go to all the other callings as well because the callings are just so nice. Like it's like an atmosphere that hard to replicate. So really excited for those events.
I love it. I got my my last RTN qualification in Louisiana of all places. So yeah,
Okay.
why not? I wasn't gonna get it at Harry Tarantula with all those freaking psychos there playing. So I just decided I was like, well, I'm here anyways. Let's just go play. So that worked
I know
out.
how that feels. Got to get out of state sometimes just to get a win.
Yeah, dude. Like I live in a snake pit, dude. Like every now and then it's nice to be tossed a rope and just be like, come over here. Like, why not?
Yeah.
All right, friends. Well, thank you so much for listening to the Instant Speed Podcast. I want to give a big ups to the Realm Game who gave me this shirt. So this is what we're rocking today. Wonderful Realm Game shirt. To our sponsors, otherwise being KFAB Cards. Go to kfabecards.com. Sealed and singles. Get your hookups there, as well as BCW Supplies. Protect your cards and all your collectibles at BCW Supplies. Use the code ISP10. Get 10% off everything you buy, including, I think they have a Bentley there. You get 10% off a Bentley. Don't hold me to it, but that's where we're at. Anyways, other than that, friends, thanks for listening to ISP. Don't forget, you're not losing if you're learning. We'll catch you next time. Bye.
Well, I work